All right, everybody, welcome back to the second video in our Cybersecurity and You series for the UW-Whitewater 2020 Virtual Tech Camp. So we're back with Dr. Anochi Fanoswala, who, as if you watched the intro video, you know is one of our cybersecurity experts at UW-Whitewater and teaches a bunch of our classes in that area. And if you haven't already, I would recommend going back and watching our intro video, so where we introduce that idea of cybersecurity. But if you've already watched it or you feel like you have a pretty good grip on what cybersecurity is and sorts of jobs that are out there, feel free to continue on. If you happen on this video through YouTube as opposed to our Whitewater website, if you look below, there's a link back to the main website that'll have links to all their resources and videos. Anyway, what we're going to get started with is our first topic, which is password security. And there's going to be an activity that you're going to do to be able to evaluate how secure your password is. But before we get into that, it makes sense to talk a little bit about first of all, why do we use passwords? Like how does the computer actually check to make sure that you are who you say you are, or at least likely who you say you are, based on your username and your password? And then also talk a little bit about how you make a secure password in the way that hackers try to break into accounts and figure out what your password is. So, Anochi, we were talking just recently about authentication. And some people might have heard of the term authentication before, maybe not. When we talk about, you're putting in your password as part of the authentication process, which is something maybe people have seen when they're using different accounts, what does it actually mean to authenticate an account?
Okay. Typically when we create our passwords, let's say we are creating an account on Spotify or or even our devices, what we do is that we typically provide a username and a password. And so when we create our username and provide the passwords during the setup process, the password that we provide is hashed and stored in a database together with
in case they haven't heard of hashing before, what does it mean to hash something?
So hashing basically would be a way of changing whatever password or whatever text you provided, so it doesn't look as it looked originally. So
it's sort of like, again, this idea of kind of like a secret message, right? So yeah, if any of you guys were into like decoder rings or stuff as kids, right, where you would play spy with your friends, it's like a much more sophisticated and much harder version, much more sophisticated version of that. That's a lot harder for people or computers to figure out.
Yes. So your password is hashed and stored in a database together with the username. So what happens every time you want to log in or access an account, you provide your username and the password. Once you provide the username and the password again is hashed, and the computer tries to match it with whatever is stored in the database. If they're able to find the match, then you'll be granted access. If not, you will be denied access. So usually, depending on the hashing algorithm and how complex your password is, it can be easy for someone to guess your password. And once they can guess it, then it will be easy to get access into your account. So as much as possible, one of the things you want to do is to create passwords that are hard for people or even computers to guess.
And that's actually a really important point, right? Because you and I think we're pretty smart people. We can make a lot of guesses quickly and guess in intelligent ways. But at the end of the day, we're people. And one of the reasons, I mean, computers are very powerful machines, but one of the things that makes computers so powerful is that they're able to perform computations very, very rapidly. And from a computer's perspective, a guess is a computation. If you guys continue in your technology journey, you'll hear of something that's called brute forcing, which basically just means trying all possible solutions. And from a computer's perspective, if you're trying to break into an account, every possible password would be a solution. So let's say you had a password, and you'll see in the activities that we have for you, the first question is, okay, is figuring out if you had a password that consisted of one single digit. How many possible guesses would there be? Well, obviously you'll figure that out on your own, but you can look at your keyboard, you can see how many digits there are, right? So you can say, all right, so for a person to guess, I would have to guess 0 through 9. And then if that's all the passwords that are available, within 10 guesses, right? 1 through 9 plus 0 is 10. I'd be able to make the guess. The computer would be able to do it even faster. And that's basically how a computer, if it's brute forcing it, it's trying all possible combinations. So it figures out what the password rules are and then tries to guess all possible combinations. So if you have very weak passwords, thinking about how powerful computers are, it's Anochi.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Um, but anyway, so we talked about guessing. What are other ways that, because we'll see later in the activity that, longer passwords are really hard for computers to guess, but people still break into accounts all the time. So if it's something that is impossible for a person to guess, it would take like a computer, say 50 years to guess. How is it that people are still breaking into accounts?
People can break into accounts through, there are things called password dictionaries. Human beings, we being humans, sometimes we have a tendency to create the same type of passwords. And so usually it's so easy for a cyber criminal or hacker to start trying with those type of passwords. Another thing is, there is a lot of human error, even when you create very complex passwords, because sometimes we cannot remember the complex passwords that we've created. We may easily write them down somewhere. And again, someone who knows where to access can easily get access to those passwords. So there are just a whole lot of ways that people can actually access your password, even when you have created a really complex password. So it's not just that you're safe after you've created a very complex password.
Yeah. So some of the things that humans do that are very predictable, like, can you give some examples of that?
Um, when
Like,
you
so for
mean,
example, as I say, my dog's name is Fluffy.
yes.
Probably everybody who talks to me knows my dog's name is Fluffy. Would Fluffy, or some variation of like Fluffy, the best dog in the world, would that be a great password for me?
Yes, it wouldn't be a great password because people tend to set password based on what they things that they are familiar with. So yeah, someone can set a password and put their date of birth, month of birth, and things like that. So yeah, those things are very predictable of about humans, and it's easy to guess passwords that way once you know something about the humans. And I'm sure in some movies, they would have seen things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything else you want to talk about with passwords, or are we ready to jump into the activity?
I think we are ready to jump into the activity.
Okay, great. So if you go back to the web page, and for those of you who, like I said, if you stumbled across this just on YouTube, if you look in the information below in this video, there is a link back to our webpage with this activity. So basically, it's designed to get you thinking about password security, and we're looking at it through the lens of just basically guessing. So the first one, like I mentioned, the first question there, it has to do with if you had, so it starts off with like single digit passwords, and then it adds on complexity. So you can maybe have multiple digits, or maybe you start incorporating letters or symbols. And it has you, for some of the easier ones, basically evaluate how many guesses it would take. And then kind of also reflecting on if we were to add additional requirements, how that would work. We also talk a little bit about guesses. So Anochi, you mentioned that when in the authentication process that it checks to see, does this hashed password match the stored hashed password, and that they get a certain number of guesses. But on a lot of platforms, they will either lock you out of your account, or they'll tell you you can't try to log in again for a certain period of time. How does this relate to this whole concept of trying to guess, whether you're brute forcing or making more intelligent guesses, like guessing based on birthdays and pet names and stuff like that?
Yeah, so platforms usually restrict how many times you can try a password because or try to log in using password, because if they allow an unlimited number of try, it's possible that the computer or the person can be able to guess the right password in that time or tries. So you find out that a typical, once you try to guess a password, you either get locked out after maybe more than three tries, or after 3 tries they tell you you have to wait 24 hours. The whole idea is that maybe the real person or the owner of the account can be able to get back there, or know that someone has tried to break into their account, when they try within the 24 or 12 hours time that's been given. So these are just measures that organizations or companies provide just to safeguard people's account and to stop criminals from gaining access.
Yeah. And then the final activity that we have in there uses another website that basically you can type in potential passwords and it will tell you how difficult or easy they are. So I would recommend, as you go through there, starting with something really short, like maybe typing in H or like a couple letters. You'll see that the longer the password and the more things you incorporate into, like numbers or symbols, the harder and harder it becomes for a computer to actually guess. But again, the caveat on that, I don't want anyone walking away from here thinking, oh, well, this style of password had said that it would take a computer 100 years to crack, so I'm going to use that password and we're good to go. Because as we spoke about, there's dictionaries, there's a lot of other ways that you can get around and figure out what a password is. So just because it would take a computer a long time to guess doesn't mean it would necessarily prevent a hacker from figuring out what it is. The other thing that I just wanted to mention briefly, I don't think we touched on, was the importance of having different passwords for different accounts. Because one way that people can get passwords, and I mentioned this in the previous video, is if there's a security breach. So let's say, somebody, let's use Spotify again. Let's say somebody managed to break into Spotify and steal some of the password and credential combos out of there. If I were using my Spotify account also for my bank account and for my social media accounts and for my work email and all that, then whoever that hacker is would be able, if they could guess my username, which is usually a password or some variation of your name, would be able to test for, if they could guess, well, I think this person's likely to have this kind of account. And then at that point, if they have a password, then all they really have to do is test different username combinations, which tend to be, fairly predictable and easier to find in many cases. So that's if you hear people talking about the importance of using different passwords, or changing passwords frequently, that's why, because you don't know, there might be a breach somewhere. Maybe somebody didn't tell you, maybe you missed the announcement, maybe they're not even aware of it yet. So hackers are pretty devious. Make sure that, especially if they're important accounts, like it's your like a financial account, make sure that you're using different, like a unique password for each of those.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But I think that's all we wanted to touch on for today. So if you, like I said, go back to our webpage. If you just came on here through YouTube, make sure you click on the link below to take you back so you can do the activity. And if you want feedback on the activity, I will be monitoring the comments. So if you have solutions or you want to talk a little bit more, feel free to post down there and I will respond. So thanks, guys, and make sure that you tune into our third and final video in this module, where we're going to talk a little bit about social engineering and stealing private information. See you soon, guys.
All right, see you.